Imagine a killer who didn't just strike randomly, but carefully numbered every victim, sent taunting letters to the police, and watched as fear spread across an entire city. Tonight, we uncover the terrifying story of the serial killer who claimed 48 lives, and sent messages that left detectives questioning if they were next. Stay with us, because the final twist will shock you in ways you'll never forget. The city of Ravenport had always been quiet. It was the kind of place where neighbors greeted each other every morning, where children rode bicycles through the streets without fear, and where police officers spent most nights handling small arguments instead of serious crimes. Nothing truly terrible had happened there in years, but on a cold October morning in 1998, that peaceful feeling began to disappear. Dark clouds covered the sky, and a light rain tapped against the windows of the Ravenport Police Department. Detective Daniel Hayes stepped inside the station, shaking drops of water from his coat. He had worked there for nearly 12 years, and most days followed the same routine. Coffee, reports, patrol updates. Nothing unusual, but today felt different. The moment Daniel entered, he noticed officers standing in small groups, whispering to each other. The receptionist avoided eye contact. Even the air inside the station felt heavy, like something bad had already happened. "Morning, Hayes," Sergeant Miller called out. His voice sounded tight. Daniel walked toward him. "What's going on?" Daniel asked. Miller didn't answer right away. Instead, he held up a white envelope using gloved hands. "You're going to want to see this," Miller said quietly. Daniel stared at the envelope. It looked ordinary, plain white, slightly damp from the rain. But something about it felt wrong. "Where did it come from?" Daniel asked. "Found in the mailbox outside about 30 minutes ago," Miller replied. "No one saw who dropped it off." Daniel took the envelope carefully. Only one word was written on the front. Police. The letters were perfectly neat. Too perfect. Daniel felt a strange chill run through him. He walked slowly to his desk and sat down. Several officers gathered nearby, watching silently as he slid a letter opener across the edge. The paper inside unfolded smoothly. Daniel began reading. He frowned. "Failed who?" He read the next line. "You walked past her yesterday, and still you didn't see what I left behind." Daniel stopped. His mind began searching through yesterday's reports. Behind him, Miller spoke quietly. "Why had a missing person case?" he said. "Young woman. Name was Emily Carter." Daniel turned slowly. "How long has she been missing?" he asked. "Since last night," Miller replied. "Didn't come home after work." Daniel looked back at the letter. His pulse quickened. He continued reading. "She was number 1. Silence filled the room. No one spoke, no one moved. Daniel swallowed and read the final line aloud. "There will be 47 more." A cold feeling spread through his chest. 47 more. That meant 48 victims in total. This wasn't a threat. This was a promise. Daniel lowered the paper slowly. "Call everyone into the briefing room," he said. Within minutes, detectives gathered around the large conference table. The letter lay in the center like a warning. Daniel explained what it said. Some officers looked confused. Others looked frightened. "You think this is real?" one officer asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied the handwriting again. Whoever wrote this letter wasn't rushing. The lines were straight. The letters were clean. This person had patience, planning, confidence. "I think we need to assume it's real," Daniel said finally. Just as he finished speaking, the phone rang loudly. The sharp sound made everyone jump. Miller picked it up quickly. "Ravenport Police," he said. His face changed almost instantly. The color drained from his cheeks. "What is it?" Daniel asked. Miller slowly lowered the receiver. "They found her," he said quietly. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. "We're Riverside Park," Miller replied. "Behind the old bridge." Daniel grabbed his coat without hesitation. "Let's move." Rain poured harder as police cars rushed toward Riverside Park. Red and blue lights flashed across wet streets as Daniel stepped out of the vehicle. Yellow police tape surrounded a wooded area near the riverbank. The air smelled like wet leaves and mud. Daniel ducked under the tape. Several officers stood nearby, speaking in low voices. A medical examiner waited beside a covered body. Daniel approached slowly. The examiner nodded. "She's been here less than 24 hours, he said. "Time of death likely sometime late last night." Daniel knelt carefully. The sheet was pulled back. Emily Carter lay motionless on the ground. She looked young, maybe 22. Her face was pale, her expression strangely peaceful. But something about the scene felt wrong. Too neat. Too arranged. Her hands were folded carefully across her chest, almost as if someone had posed her. Then Daniel noticed something resting on her coat. A small white card. He picked it up carefully. Written in the same neat handwriting were the words Phi 1. Daniel's heart pounded loudly in his chest. "He meant it?" he whispered. Miller stepped beside him. "You think the letter writer did this?" Miller asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "I know he did." A cold wind swept across the river, rustling the trees. Daniel stared at the number again. Number 1. That meant this was only the beginning. Somewhere in Ravenport, a killer was watching. Waiting. Planning the next move. Later that night, Daniel sat alone at his desk inside the quiet station. Most officers had gone home, but he stayed behind, staring at the letter again. Something about it felt deliberate, personal. He read it once more, and this time, he noticed something new. At the bottom corner of the page, barely visible, was a small symbol. A circle, with a single slash through it. Daniel leaned closer. "What does that mean?" he whispered to himself. A voice answered from behind him. "It means he wants to be remembered." Daniel turned quickly. Standing in the doorway was Dr. Laura Bennett, the department's criminal psychologist. She stepped forward slowly and studied the letter. "I've seen symbols like this before," she said quietly. "Killers who leave marks like this don't just want to kill." Daniel frowned. "What do they want?" he asked. Laura met his eyes. "They want attention," she said. Daniel stared down at the letter again. Somewhere out there, a killer had already claimed his first victim, and Daniel had the terrible feeling. The next letter had already been written, and it was already on its way. 3 days passed after Emily Carter's body was found. 3 long, tense days that felt heavier with every passing hour. The city of Ravenport had changed overnight. What was once a peaceful town now felt uneasy and suspicious. News about the strange letter and the murder spread quickly through television and newspapers. People whispered in grocery stores. Parents stopped letting their children walk alone. Streetlights stayed on longer at night. Fear had arrived, and it wasn't leaving. Detective Daniel Hayes barely slept during those days. Every night, he sat at his desk under the dim yellow light, rereading the killer's letter again and again. He studied each word, each letter stroke, searching for clues hidden in the message. But no matter how many times he looked, the words stayed the same, cold, careful, confident. This wasn't someone acting in anger. This was someone who planned everything. And that thought frightened Daniel the most. On the 4th morning, the silence inside the police station broke once again. Sergeant Miller rushed down the hallway, holding something carefully in his gloved hands. Daniel noticed him immediately. His heart sank. "It's here again," Miller said. Daniel slowly stood up. In Miller's hand was another white envelope. Same size, same paper, same neat handwriting. The single word written across the front made Daniel's chest tighten. "Police." For a moment, neither man spoke. The room felt too quiet. Daniel took the envelope and walked to the conference table. Officers nearby gathered slowly, watching with nervous expressions. "Let's see what he wants this time," Miller muttered. Daniel carefully slid open the envelope and pulled out the folded letter inside. This one felt thicker, longer, more deliberate. He unfolded the paper and began reading aloud. "You found her faster than I expected." Daniel clenched his jaw. So the killer was watching the news. Watching their response. But you still don't understand the game. The word game hung in the air. Several officers exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel continued. Number 2 is already waiting. His pulse quickened. She enjoyed the music before the end. Daniel paused. Music. Miller frowned. What does that mean? He asked. Daniel read the next line slowly. Did you hear it too? A cold feeling crawled down Daniel's spine. Then the final instruction. Find her before the rain washes away my gift. The letter ended with the same strange symbol. A circle with a slash. And beneath it Fight 2. Silence filled the room. Miller spoke first. Music, he repeated. What kind of music? Daniel thought quickly. If he mentioned music. Daniel said. Someone must have heard something. He turned toward dispatch. Check every report from last night, he ordered. Any calls about loud music, houses, parks, abandoned buildings, anything unusual. Officers rushed to phones and radios. Minutes passed. Each second felt heavier than the last. Then, the radio crackled to life. Unit 12 to headquarters. Daniel grabbed the radio. Go ahead, he said. We received complaints last night about loud piano music. The officer said. Came from the old Harbor Warehouse district. Neighbors said it lasted for hours, then suddenly stopped around midnight. Daniel didn't hesitate. That's our location, he said. Move out. The old Harbor Warehouse district sat near the edge of the city, forgotten and mostly abandoned. Rusted buildings lined empty streets, and broken windows reflected flashes of lightning as rain began falling again. Police cars pulled up one after another. Red and blue lights lit the dark area like a warning. Daniel stepped out of the car and pulled his coat tighter. Rain tapped loudly against the pavement. Search every building, he ordered. Officers spread out quickly, shining flashlights into dark doorways. The wind howled through the empty streets, making loose metal signs rattle loudly. Then, a shout broke the silence.
Detective!
Over here. Daniel ran toward the voice. It came from inside Warehouse 14. He pushed open the heavy metal door and stepped inside. The air smelled damp and stale. Dust floated through the beam of his flashlight. Broken crates lay scattered across the floor, but in the center of the room, something stood that didn't belong on a piano. Old. Dark. Covered in scratches. Daniel stepped closer slowly. One of the piano keys moved slightly, making a soft sound, as if someone had touched it recently. Then he saw her. A young woman sat on the piano bench, leaning forward. Still, silent, Daniel approached carefully. Her name, they would later confirm, was Sarah Mitchell, a college student reported missing only hours earlier. Her hands rested gently on the piano keys, as if she had been forced to play. A small white card sat beside her. Daniel picked it up. Written clearly. Fay 2. Miller stepped closer. He's staging them, Miller whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes, he said, like scenes in a story. But something else caught his eye. A small tape recorder sat on top of the piano. Daniel stared at it for a moment, then pressed the play button. Soft piano music filled the warehouse. Slow, beautiful, peaceful. But suddenly, the sound changed. A loud scraping noise echoed through the recording. Then came a weak voice, a woman's voice, shaking, terrified. Please stop. Daniel froze. Every officer in the room stood silent, listening. The recording ended with a sharp click. Silence returned once again. Miller swallowed nervously. He recorded this, he said quietly. Daniel nodded. Yes, he replied. He wanted us to hear her fear. Later that evening, tension filled the police station. 2 victims in less than a week. 2 carefully planned scenes. And a killer who clearly enjoyed the attention. Dr. Laura Bennett sat across from Daniel, studying both letters side by side. He's not just killing, she said thoughtfully. He's performing. Daniel leaned forward. What do you mean? Laura tapped the second letter. He chooses places that create emotion. The park. The piano. Each victim becomes part of a display. Daniel sighed. So this is entertainment for him. Laura nodded. Wes, she said. And he wants an audience. Daniel stared at the strange symbol at the bottom of the letter. If he wants attention, Daniel said slowly, then he's going to keep writing. Laura didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were old newspaper clippings. Daniel flipped through them carefully. Each article described missing persons from different cities years ago, and each one mentioned strange letters sent to police with the same symbol. Daniel looked up sharply. You're telling me he's done this before? Laura nodded. Yes. Daniel felt a chill spread through his body. How many victims? He asked quietly. Laura hesitated, then spoke carefully. In one letter, he claimed 27. Silence filled the room. Daniel stared down at the letters again. If that was true, then Emily and Sarah weren't the beginning. They were only the latest victims in a much larger nightmare. Just then, an officer rushed into the room. Detective Hayes. Daniel stood quickly. What is it? The officer held up another envelope, fresh, unopened, still damp from the rain. Daniel stared at it, his pulse racing. How long ago did this arrive? He asked. Just now, the officer replied. Daniel reached out slowly and took the envelope. This time, something was different. Written clearly across the front were two chilling words. TODTVAS. For the first time, the killer wasn't writing to the police. He was writing to Daniel personally. And that meant one terrifying truth. The game had just become personal. The room felt colder than before as Detective Daniel Hayes stared at the envelope resting on the table. His name was written across the front in sharp, careful handwriting. TODTAHLS, not to the department, not to the police, to him. For the first time since this nightmare began, Daniel felt something new, fear mixed with anger. How does he know your name? Sergeant Miller asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the envelope. Open it, Dr. Laura Bennett said softly. We need to know what he wants. Daniel took a deep breath and picked up the letter opener. The metal blade slid slowly across the seal, making a faint tearing sound that echoed in the silent room. He unfolded the paper inside. It felt heavier than the others. More personal. Daniel began reading aloud. Hello, Daniel. A chill ran down his spine. The killer wasn't hiding behind titles anymore. He was speaking directly, like they already knew each other. Daniel continued. You look tired today. You should sleep more. Miller frowned. What? He said. That's impossible. Daniel swallowed hard. That morning, he had rubbed his eyes several times in the hallway. Only officers inside the building could have seen that. Which meant one terrifying possibility. The killer had been watching them. Daniel forced himself to keep reading. Did you enjoy the music? Sarah played beautifully, didn't she? I almost kept her longer. Laura shook her head slowly. He's enjoying this, she whispered. Every moment. Daniel continued reading. You're different from the others, smarter, but still slow. His jaw tightened. I expected you to notice sooner. Daniel paused. Notice what? Miller asked. Daniel read the next line slowly. We met once before, Daniel. You just don't remember. Silence filled the room. Laura leaned forward. Keep reading, she urged. Daniel's fingers tightened around the paper. Number 3 will remind you. At the bottom of the page was the same symbol. The circle with the slash. And beneath it, Fan 3. Daniel lowered the letter slowly. The room felt heavy with tension. One met before. Miller repeated. You remember anyone suspicious? Daniel rubbed his forehead. Memories flashed through his mind. Old cases, witnesses, suspects, crime scenes. Faces he had seen years ago. But none stood out. Laura studied Daniel's expression. He could be lying, she said, trying to confuse you. Daniel nodded slightly. Or he could be telling the truth, he replied. Before anyone could speak again, the station phone rang sharply. Everyone jumped. Miller answered quickly. Ravenport Police. His face changed almost instantly. Daniel stepped closer. What happened? Miller lowered the receiver slowly. They found another body, he said. Daniel's heart pounded. Where? Miller swallowed. Outside the old Lincoln Elementary School. Daniel froze. Lincoln Elementary. The name hit him like a sudden punch. That wasn't just another location. That was his school. The drive to Lincoln Elementary felt longer than usual. Rain poured heavily against the windshield, blurring the road ahead. Thunder rumbled in the distance, making the night feel darker and more threatening. Daniel sat in silence the entire way. Memories began rising in his mind. Childhood laughter, classroom bells, playground games. But now those memories felt twisted, wrong. As police cars arrived, flashing lights lit up the abandoned school. The building stood dark and silent, surrounded by rusted fences and broken pavement. The playground swings moved slightly in the wind, creaking like old metal ghosts. Daniel stepped out slowly. His boots splashed into shallow puddles. He stared at the building. "I haven't been here in years," he whispered. Miller placed a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. Daniel nodded, though he didn't feel okay. "Let's find her," he said. Officers stood near the front entrance, shining flashlights across the ground. Daniel approached carefully. And then he saw her. A woman lay near the school doors, motionless. Her body was arranged neatly, just like the others, hands folded, eyes closed. Too peaceful, too deliberate. Daniel walked closer. A small white card rested gently on her shoulder. He picked it up. Fanty 3, his chest tightened. But something else caught his attention. Something lying beside the victim. A photograph. Daniel bent down and lifted it carefully. The moment he saw it, his stomach dropped. It was an old class photo. Faded at the edges. Children standing in neat rows, smiling brightly at the camera. Daniel recognized it instantly. Lincoln Elementary. His class. Years ago. Laura stepped beside him. "What is it?" she asked. Daniel pointed at the photo. "That's me," he said quietly. A younger version of himself stood near the front, smiling. But Laura leaned closer. "Look again," she said. Daniel scanned the faces carefully, row after row of children. Then, his eyes stopped. A boy stood near the back, quiet, almost hidden behind taller students, thin, serious, not smiling like the others. Daniel whispered the name slowly. "Ethan Cole." Miller frowned. "You know him?" Daniel nodded. "He was in my class," Daniel said. "Quiet kid. Always alone, never talked much." Laura crossed her arms. "Did anyone bully him?" she asked. Daniel thought carefully. Small memories returned. Kids laughing, whispering, ignoring Ethan at lunch. "I don't remember bullying," Daniel said slowly. "But, no one really talked to him either." Laura's voice turned serious. "That can be just as damaging." Miller leaned closer. "What happened to him?" Daniel shook his head. "He moved away after 5th grade, he said. No goodbye. No explanation. He just disappeared." The wind blew hard through the empty schoolyard. Daniel stared again at Ethan's face in the photo. Something about his expression now felt different. Colder, angry. Laura spoke quietly. "If he remembers you," she said, "this is personal." Daniel nodded slowly. "I think we just found our killer." But deep inside, he felt something worse, a terrible thought forming. If Ethan had chosen this school, and chosen Daniel, then this wasn't just about victims. This was about revenge, and Daniel had a feeling. He was already part of the killer's plan. The name Ethan Cole quickly became the center of the investigation. Inside the Ravenport Police Department, the quiet halls were replaced with constant movement. Phones rang nonstop. Officers rushed from desk to desk carrying files, photographs, and old records. Everyone knew the case had changed. Now they had a name. And possibly a face. Detective Daniel Hayes sat at the conference table, staring at the faded class photograph from Lincoln Elementary. His finger rested lightly on Ethan's image. A thin boy. Dark hair. Serious expression. Not smiling like the others. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "How did we miss him?" Sergeant Miller asked, standing beside him. Daniel shook his head slowly. "He left town after 5th grade," Daniel said. "No one stayed in touch. No one asked where he went. The dark. Laura Bennett stepped forward and studied the photograph carefully. That's exactly the kind of childhood that can create deep resentment, she said. Miller frowned. You think this started back then? He asked. Laura nodded. Yes, she replied. If Ethan felt ignored, invisible, or unwanted, those feelings could have grown stronger over time. Daniel looked at her. So he turned himself into someone people couldn't ignore. Laura met his eyes. Yes, she said quietly, by becoming unforgettable. The room fell silent. Those words felt heavy. Unforgettable. That was exactly what the killer wanted. Within hours, officers began digging through old records connected to Ethan Cole. School files, medical reports, old addresses, anything connected to his name. An officer hurried into the room holding a stack of papers. "We found his old address," she said. Daniel looked up quickly. "We're Edge of Ravenport," she replied. "Small house. His family moved out when he was 11. Daniel grabbed his coat. "Let's check it." The house stood alone at the end of a narrow road. Weeds covered the front yard, and broken shutters hung loosely from the windows. The building looked abandoned for years. Daniel stepped out of the car slowly. "This place hasn't been touched in a long time," Miller said. Daniel nodded. "Still worth checking." They pushed open the front door carefully. It creaked loudly as it swung inward. Dust covered every surface inside. The air smelled stale and dry. Officers spread through the house, searching each room. Daniel walked into what appeared to be an old bedroom. Small, empty. But something scratched into the wall caught his attention. He stepped closer. Carved deep into the paint were the words, "Taunt for me." Daniel felt a cold shiver run down his back. Laura entered the room behind him. She stared at the message. "He wrote that as a child," she said softly. Daniel ran his fingers across the carved letters. "Or someone made him feel forgotten," he replied. Then another officer called from the living room. "Detective, you need to see this." Daniel rushed out. On the floor lay an old cardboard box filled with papers. Inside were drawings. Hundreds of them, stick figures standing alone. Others crossed out. Some lying on the ground. And many had numbers written beside them. Daniel flipped through the drawings slowly. "Numbers again," Miller said. Laura looked deeply concerned. "This started long before the killings," she said. "He was planning something, even as a child." Daniel felt his chest tighten. If Ethan had been thinking this way for years, then this wasn't sudden madness. This was a long-built storm. Hours later, the investigation took a sudden turn. Back at the station, another officer rushed into the room. "Detective Hayes." Daniel looked up immediately. "What did you find?" "We tracked a rental connected to Ethan," she said. "Fake name, but same handwriting on the forms." Daniel stepped closer. "What kind of rental?" "A storage unit," she replied. "On the south side of town." Daniel grabbed his keys. "Let's go." The storage facility stood under dark clouds as police cars surrounded it. Wind pushed dust across the empty lot. Unit numbers stretched in long rows of metal doors. Daniel checked the report again. "Unit 48, he said quietly. Miller frowned. "That number again?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah," he replied. "Not a coincidence." Officers surrounded the unit. Daniel stepped forward. "Break the lock." A loud snap echoed as the bolt cutters crushed the metal lock. Daniel slowly lifted the metal door. It rattled loudly as it rolled upward. Then, everyone froze. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs, dozens of them. Men, women, teenagers, children, all staring out from printed images taped across the walls. Some smiling, some serious, some unaware of what would later happen to them. Daniel stepped inside slowly. His heart pounded. Numbers were written beside each photograph. Fay 1213, he kept counting. 23 photographs filled the wall, but more spaces remained empty. Empty spaces marked with numbers up to Fay 48. "Waiting," Daniel whispered softly. 23 victims. Laura stepped beside him. "And 25 more planned," she said. A heavy silence filled the room. Then Miller pointed toward the far wall. "Detective, look at this." Daniel turned. Mounted at the center of the wall was a large board, a map of Ravenport. Red circles marked different locations across the city: parks, buildings, schools, warehouses. Each circle matched the location of past discoveries. Daniel studied the map carefully. Then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. One location was circled more than any other. Again. And again. And Daniel leaned closer. His hands trembled slightly, because the location marked in red was his home address. Miller spoke quietly. "He knows where you live." Laura's voice turned tense. "This is personal now." Daniel stared at the map. A terrible realization formed in his mind. This wasn't just revenge against the world. This was revenge against him. The room fell silent. Then Daniel noticed something else lying on the table beneath the map. Another envelope. White, perfectly placed. Waiting. Daniel picked it up slowly. His pulse thundered in his ears. He turned the envelope over, and read the words written across the front. Final Lesti Ayo felt a cold wave of dread rise through his body, because deep down, he already knew. The next step would lead directly to the end of this nightmare. The storage unit fell silent after the discovery. No one spoke. Detective Daniel Hayes stood frozen in front of the large board, filled with photographs. Faces stared back at him from every direction. Victims who had already been taken, and empty spaces waiting for those who hadn't yet been chosen. But what disturbed him most was the red circle drawn again and again around one location. His home. His safe place. Or at least, what used to be safe. Sergeant Miller stepped closer. "We need to secure your house immediately," he said. Daniel nodded slowly, but his eyes remained locked on the envelope resting on the table beneath the map. White. Perfectly placed. Waiting to be opened. Across the front, written in the same careful handwriting, were two chilling words: Laura Fiar. Dr. Laura Bennett crossed her arms, her expression serious. "He left it here for you to find," she said. "That means he wants you to read it now." Daniel swallowed hard. For the first time since the investigation began, his hands felt slightly unsteady. Not from fear of death, but from fear of understanding. Fear of what this letter might reveal. He carefully opened the envelope. The room stayed completely silent as he unfolded the paper. It was longer than the others. Much longer. Filled with tight, perfectly straight lines of handwriting. Daniel began reading aloud. "You finally found my collection, Daniel." His jaw tightened. "Did you like it? Each face has a story. Each number has a memory." Daniel felt anger rising inside him. "This isn't a collection," he muttered. "They were people." Laura placed a gentle hand on the table. "Keep reading," she said softly. Daniel continued. 48 is not just a number. It's a memory." He frowned. "It's the number of times I was ignored." The words echoed in the quiet room. "The number of times I sat alone." Daniel's breathing slowed. "The number of times no one noticed I existed." Laura leaned forward slightly. "This is about rejection," she whispered. Daniel kept reading. "Every victim represents a moment someone turned away from me." His fingers tightened around the letter. Someone who didn't see me, didn't hear me, didn't care. A memory surfaced in Daniel's mind. A school cafeteria. Children laughing loudly. A boy sitting alone at the end of the table. No one speaking to him. Daniel looked down at the next line. "You were there too, Daniel." His chest tightened. "You remember the day they laughed at me?" Another memory flashed. Kids whispering. Someone dropping a tray. Food spilling across the floor. Laughter echoing across the room. And Ethan standing alone. Embarrassed. Humiliated. Daniel remembered walking past that moment. Doing nothing. Saying nothing. He whispered softly. "I remember." Laura looked at him. "What happened?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. "I saw kids laughing at him once," he admitted. "I didn't join them, but I didn't help either." Laura sighed quietly. For someone already feeling invisible, silence can feel like betrayal. Daniel felt guilt creeping into his chest. He returned to the letter. You walked away like everyone else. Daniel swallowed hard. So now I make sure no one walks away from me. Miller shook his head angrily, his blaming others for his crimes. He muttered. Laura nodded yes. But in his mind, this is justice. Daniel read the next section carefully. Number 48 will be the most important. The room fell silent again. Ooh. Miller asked quietly. Daniel kept reading. The last number is always the most meaningful. His heart pounded louder with each word. The final moment. The final memory. Then came the line that changed everything. Come to Lincoln Elementary at midnight. Daniel froze. Laura leaned forward. What else? She asked. Daniel continued. Come alone. Miller shook his head immediately. No way, he said. That's a trap. Daniel read the final line slowly. If you bring anyone with you, number 48 dies before you arrive. Silence filled the room. Heavy, uncomfortable, terrifying. Daniel lowered the letter slowly. Laura spoke first. He wants you there, she said. Daniel nodded. Yes. Miller stepped closer. You're not going alone, he insisted. We'll set up backup. Daniel shook his head. If he sees anyone else, he might kill the final victim. Laura's expression turned thoughtful. He needs closure, she said. That's why he chose the school. Daniel stared at the floor. Lincoln Elementary. Where everything began. Where Ethan first felt forgotten. Who is number 48? Miller asked quietly. Daniel shook his head slowly. I don't know, he replied. But deep inside, a terrible feeling began forming. A quiet voice whispering that he already knew the answer. Later that night, police officers surrounded Daniel's house. They searched every room, every corner, every shadow. No sign of Ethan. But the fear remained. Daniel stood outside watching flashing lights reflect off wet pavement. Laura stepped beside him. You don't have to carry guilt for what happened back then, she said. Daniel stared into the distance. Maybe not, he replied, but he does. Laura crossed her arms. He built this story in his mind for years, she said, and now he wants you to finish it. Daniel nodded slowly. Lightning flashed across the sky. Thunder followed seconds later. Midnight was coming, and with it, the final confrontation. Daniel checked his watch. Only 1 hour left. 1 hour until he walked back into the place where everything started. 1 hour until he faced the man who had turned childhood silence into deadly revenge. And deep inside, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the final victim was closer than anyone realized. The night was dark and stormy when Detective Daniel Hayes arrived at Lincoln Elementary. Rain pelted the abandoned schoolyard, drumming against the pavement like a warning. The swings swayed back and forth in the wind, creaking eerily, and the empty classrooms seemed to whisper secrets from the past. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. Every step he took toward the school reminded him of the first time he had seen Ethan Cole. That lonely boy sitting alone in the cafeteria, ignored by everyone, including himself. And now, 20 years later, that boy, or the man he had become, was waiting for him. Dr. Laura Bennett and Sergeant Miller had stayed behind, monitoring the perimeter and communication channels. Daniel knew he was alone. That was what the final letter had demanded. 1 hour had passed since he arrived, and every shadow seemed to stretch longer, twisting into shapes his mind couldn't ignore. He reached the front doors and paused. His reflection shimmered in the dark glass. The storm outside mirrored his inner turmoil. One deep breath, Daniel told himself. This was the final step, one step toward stopping Ethan Cole, and hopefully saving the last victim. Inside the school, the air smelled of damp wood and old paper. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming small puddles on the floor. The echoes of Daniel's boots sounded like a countdown. Every creak of the floorboards made him flinch. Then he saw her. A young woman sat in the middle of the gymnasium. Her hands were bound, but she was alive, shaking, terrified, yet aware. Her name was Maya Reynolds, the final intended victim. Daniel rushed to her side and whispered, "It's okay. I'm here. You're safe now." Suddenly, the gym doors slammed shut behind him. A shadow moved in the corner, just beyond the reach of the flashlight. Daniel's pulse skyrocketed. "Detective Hayes," a voice said calmly. Soft, cold, but unmistakably familiar. Daniel froze. "Ethan," he said quietly, almost to himself. "It's over. Let her go." Ethan Cole stepped into the light. He had changed. Taller, leaner, with sharp, angular features that made his pale face look even more sinister. His dark eyes seemed to pierce Daniel's very soul. In his hand was a small notebook. The same one used to catalog every victim, every number, every detail. "You finally came," Ethan said with a twisted smile. "I knew you would." Daniel stepped forward slowly. "This ends tonight, Ethan. No more letters. No more numbers. No more victims." Ethan shook his head, laughing softly. "You don't understand. This isn't just about the victims. It's about you. You remember that boy? The one everyone ignored. The one you passed by in the cafeteria." Daniel's stomach twisted. He remembered. He had remembered every detail for the first time. The laughter, the silence, the sense of helplessness. And he realized the truth. This was never random. Ethan had blamed him personally. "You could have helped me," Ethan whispered. "But you didn't. So now you watch as I finish what I started." Daniel's mind raced. He needed a plan. Ethan was clever, meticulous, and unafraid to kill. One wrong move, and Maya would die. "I see you, Ethan," Daniel said firmly. "You don't have to do this. You're not invisible anymore. You can stop. Let her go." Ethan's eyes flickered, a moment of hesitation, but only for a second. "Stop. After all these years, you think I can just erase the memories?" Daniel noticed a small hinge in the wall near the gym floor. A loose panel, likely where Ethan had stored the last victim. "Ethan, you're trapped here. You've counted every move, but not mine." In a sudden rush, Daniel lunged toward Ethan. The man moved fast, but the slippery gym floor gave him a slight disadvantage. Daniel tackled him, and the notebook slipped from Ethan's grasp, landing near Maya. The struggle was tense. Ethan fought with every ounce of strength, but Daniel's determination to save Maya fueled him. With a final push, Daniel pinned Ethan to the ground, cuffing him just as the first police backup stormed in through the side doors. Laura rushed forward, untied Maya's hands. She sobbed with relief as Daniel helped her to her feet. Ethan sat silently on the floor, defeated but still cold-eyed. "Do you understand now?" he whispered. "You made me who I am." Daniel looked down at him, voice steady. "You chose this path, Ethan. No one forced you. Your past doesn't define your future. This ends tonight." Later, at the police station, Ethan was booked, and Maya was reunited with her family. Daniel sat alone in his office, staring at the wall where a map of Ravenport used to be. He thought about the 48 victims. The lives stolen. The letters. The fear that had gripped the city for weeks. But he also thought about closure, about justice, about how a single act of attention, or neglect, could shape someone's life in unimaginable ways. And even though Ethan would spend the rest of his life behind bars, the story of the boy who was forgotten, and the detective who finally noticed him, would never be forgotten. Because sometimes, the smallest choices can echo for decades, and sometimes, the cost of ignoring them is terrifyingly high. Daniel exhaled slowly, knowing the nightmare was over, but also knowing the memory of the 48 victims would never leave him. The storm had passed, but its shadow remained.